Hey guys, this is your host Thomas Tyree here from On the Hot Podcast. Today, I have some bonus content for you guys. The bonus content we'll be covering today will be in the sport of boxing. In today's bonus segment, I'll be sharing my top 5 Canelo Alvarez's victories of his illustrious boxing career. I'll be going over his top 5 wins in my opinion, and then towards the end of the segment, I'll be sharing an overall letter grade on Canelo Alvarez's overall resume of his illustrious boxing career. So starting off with number 1, I believe Canelo Alvarez's biggest victory was against Triple G in 2018. Now, the rivalry between Canelo Alvarez and Triple G is very well documented. The bad blood that those two respective fighters had towards each other, a bitter rivalry, was one of the best trilogies that we've seen in recent memory in the sport of boxing. But I do believe Canelo Alvarez's biggest victory of his boxing career came against Triple G and their second fight that took place in 2019. I think that was the best fight of the trilogy. But it added more fuel to the fire when Canelo Alvarez tested positive for a PED test that postponed their fight that was supposed to take place in the spring of 2018, then got postponed to the back end of 2018, the second half. And it was an epic back-and-forth fight between Canelo Alvarez and Triple G. And this was following their first fight that was very controversial that ended in a draw. But both fighters in the second fight were exchanging bombs in the pocket, going back and forth, fighting in the inside, landing some clean exchanges. And I'm surprised both of them did not go down and did not get dropped for the first time in their boxing careers in this fight. Both have tremendous chins, some of the greatest chins I've ever seen in boxing history. But Canelo Alvarez was the one who got his hand raised in victory that night. And it's unfortunate the trilogy came 4 years later, because I feel like it could have been a different story or a different outcome based off of what would have happened in the trilogy. Maybe Triple G would have gotten one over Canelo if the fight didn't happen 4 years later. But as I digress, after that, Canelo Alvarez went on to win 7 fights and go 7-1. After that second fight against Triple G, then the trilogy, of course, took place in 2022. But I do believe that victory in 2018 was Canelo Alvarez's biggest victory of his illustrious boxing career. Now, the second biggest win of Canelo Alvarez's boxing career would be the third and final fight between him and Triple G, the trilogy that concluded in 2022. Now, I do believe that is Canelo Alvarez's second biggest victory of his boxing career. That was the closure that Canelo Alvarez needed in his boxing career, winning 2 out of 3 fights against his bitter rival in Triple G. Now, obviously, the third fight was not as entertaining as the first 2 fights. The third fight was a classic, but it doesn't live up to the hype or the expectations that we had for the first 2 fights. But Triple G, you expected this. He was 40 years of age at this time. His prime years were behind him. Canelo Alvarez was 32, still fresh in his prime years. And the second half of the fight was entertaining. It was a masterclass performance. It looked like Canelo Alvarez was going to have possibly a cakewalk in the second half of the fight. But Triple G turned the clock back, and had an impressive performance against Canelo Alvarez. But in the end, it was Canelo Alvarez who weathered the storm in the second half of the fight, landed the cleaner exchanges, and won the counter-punching battle. And Canelo Alvarez, that's all she wrote. And that was after Canelo Alvarez suffered his second career loss against Dmitry Bivol months prior to that trilogy. A lot of people were in question, was the trilogy going to happen, since Canelo Alvarez came up short, moving up to 175, and a cherry pick went wrong when he picked Dmitry Bivol on Cinco de Mayo weekend in 2022. But I think that's the closure that Canelo Alvarez is needed. Was it the best version of Triple G? Absolutely not. But the fact that he won 2 out of 3 of the fights in the trilogy, I think that's the closure Canelo Alvarez needed. And I think the bad blood ended that night between Canelo Alvarez and Triple G. Third fight would be the third biggest win of Canelo Alvarez's career would be against his KO victory that he had against Sergey Kovalev in 2019. Now, Canelo Alvarez dared himself to be great, and he moved all the way up to the light heavyweight division at the 175-pound division in 2019 to win the WBO title against Sergey in 2019. Now, this was a very action-packed fight between Canelo Alvarez and Sergey. And that night, it was a back-and-forth classic. Sergey was depending on his jab. And that jab throughout the entire fight actually was slowing down Canelo Alvarez offensively. That jab, that stiff jab that was coming right down the pipeline, was giving Canelo Alvarez a lot of problems in that fight in 2019. But towards the end, Canelo Alvarez started turning it up using his speed, his power, and he started winning the counter-punching battle against Sergey. And that helped him win the fight. I mean, the left hook followed with the right hand was all she wrote for Canelo Alvarez to get the 11th round knockout against Sergey in 2019 to win the WBO title at the light heavyweight division. So Canelo Alvarez dared himself to be great in 2019, scored a huge victory against Sergey. Win number 4 would be Canelo Alvarez's knockout victory against Caleb Plant in 2021. Now, I think this is the 4th biggest victory of Canelo Alvarez's career because he did something that he did not do in his illustrious boxing career, and that is become an undisputed champion in the sport of boxing. You become an undisputed champion by winning the WBC, WBA, WBO, and IBF titles, holding all the titles simultaneously. And he did that for the first time in his career, knocking out Caleb Plant in 2021. Now, honestly, that fight in 2021, the build-up, the highly anticipated fight between Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant, when you think about it, it was probably one of my favorite fights in 2021. And they lived up to the hype and the expectations because, you know, these two guys were smacking each other, talking about each other's moms and etc. and the build-up. But when they got in the boxing ring, they made magic together. And truthfully, I think Caleb Plant was winning that fight up until the 11th round, and all 3 judges had Caleb Plant on their judges' scorecard. I really believe that Caleb Plant, if he did not get knocked out, would have defeated Canelo Alvarez that night. But as I digress, it was Canelo Alvarez that smelled blood in the water as the later rounds went on. You could see Caleb Plant was starting to die down. He wasn't as effective, and his punches weren't as effective as Canelo Alvarez was eating the punching, taking punishment in order to dish out punishment. And Canelo Alvarez, when you know he starts walking his opponents down, especially at the super middleweight division where he is a weight bully, and that's when the best version of Canelo Alvarez comes out. And he scored a knockdown in the 11th round against Caleb Plant. And followed with that, the left hook followed with a dangerous uppercut that scored the first knockdown. And then followed by a round of punches, a combination of fury of punches, put Caleb Plant down. That's all she wrote. And that night, Canelo Alvarez became an undisputed super middleweight champion, the first ever super middleweight champion, undisputed super middleweight champion that the 168-pound of the sport of boxing has ever seen. So that was very pivotal. And last but not least, number 5, I will say Canelo Alvarez's 5th best win, in my opinion, would be his unanimous decision victory that he had against Miguel Cotto in 2015. Now, in this fight, this helped Canelo Alvarez become a pay-per-view star. And he defeated a 2-division world champion, Miguel Cotto. Now, obviously, for those that followed the sport in 2013, Canelo Alvarez got his big pay-per-view break when he fought Floyd Mayweather. But unfortunately, Floyd Mayweather mopped the floor with the undefeated Canelo Alvarez and made it look like a cakewalk. One of Floyd Mayweather's best performances of his boxing career. But after that, we didn't know if Canelo Alvarez would be back to that scene or not. But his victory that he had by unanimous decision against Miguel Cotto, a 2-division world champion, was very significant for Canelo Alvarez's career because it was Canelo's biggest test since Floyd, and he had a very impressive performance against Miguel Cotto. This victory against Miguel Cotto actually helped Canelo Alvarez become that pay-per-view star and a pound-for-pound fighter because Floyd basically retired in 2015 after the Manny Pacquiao fight. Obviously, he came back in 2017 to fight Conor, but after that, Floyd was basically gone, and Canelo Alvarez stepped up and became the biggest pay-per-view star that the sport of boxing has seen since Floyd has retired. So this win against Miguel Cotto was very pivotal in terms of significance for what was going to happen for Canelo. That's why I have it as number 5. But overall letter grade, I will give Canelo Alvarez for his resume. Overall letter grade, it's an A+. Canelo Alvarez's overall letter grade is a A+. Outstanding resume. And look at the resume, guys. He has 62 victories, 2 losses, 2 draws to his resume, 39 victories come away of knockout, 4-division world champion, former undisputed champion, first ever undisputed champion at the super middleweight division. And he has some elite victories, guys. I know that this is the back end of Canelo Alvarez's career. He doesn't look as strong as what he did 3 to 5 years ago, but his victories stand the test of time. 2 victories against Triple G, Miguel Cotto, Sergey, Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, Jermell Charlo. I mean, this is the best resume that we've seen hands down since Floyd Mayweather has retired from the sport of boxing. That's how elite Canelo Alvarez's resume truly is. And when it's all said and done, I'm a critic of Canelo. And I do get on him for not giving David Benavidez a fight. But at the end of the day, you got to admire the greatness while we still have it. And you got to take into consideration how elite this man's resume is. Truly top notch. I give it an A+. But that is my thoughts on Canelo Alvarez's resume, and those are my personal top 5 wins for Canelo Alvarez in his boxing career. That is all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. This is your host, Thomas Tyree, signing off, and I'll see you guys on next week's episode.